Brio Consulting would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and waters on which this podcast is recorded in Jindavick, Australia. We pay our respects to elders past and present. Hello and welcome to this first episode of Brio's Meet a Bright Spark podcast series. At Brio, we are passionate about what we do, and we know there are so many other trainers working out there in the public safety sector who love what they do too. We recognise the difference that an enthusiastic and experienced person can make to learning and development. My name's Catherine Burke, and today we are talking with David Parsons, who is based in New South Wales, Australia. On paper, you will find David Parsons listed as the Director of Crisis Management Australia. But if you have worked in the water, mining or wider EM sector in Australia, volunteered with New South Wales SES, studied EM in Australia or New Zealand, been a part of organisations like AIES, or if you use the AIDR handbooks, then likely you may already know David or have used some of his work. He is a lifelong learner himself with an interest in neuroscience. When he is in the training room, he is an engaging storyteller, agile facilitator who can fly by the seat of his pants while making it look easy. But what makes David the perfect person to kick off this series is his unwavering passion for improving the emergency management sector through the upskilling of paid and volunteer leaders and incident management teams and supporting the development of organisations. Welcome, David. Thank you for speaking with us today. Just to start with, did you want to share a little bit more about you and anything else you've been up to lately?
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. In 2023, it's been a really busy year working across a range of emergency management training areas, involved in running response recovery leadership development training for New Zealand for all their response recovery leaders. And in Australia, working both for ASIMS on the incident management skill sets, but for the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience, running their masterclass series across a range of programs and a range of states and territories. And also just on the side to fill in that spare time, working at Charles Sturt University with the undergraduate program. So fingers in lots of pies, get to meet really a vast range of people across the emergency management sector, learning from the basic skill sets through those advanced leadership skill sets. So extremely privileged to meet Australia's emergency management sector in a very broad way.
And you've been working as a trainer and facilitator for a very long time, particularly in this public safety emergency management space. How did you end up being a trainer and facilitator?
Well, actually, since you say, I was just thinking about what you've just said. It's 46 years of running incident and emergency management training now. So I started off as a volunteer with the SES at the same time as at Teachers College. And, of course, those two things merged. So I was able to bring my skill sets from being, in fact, a primary school teacher for the first 12 working years before moving into the emergency management sector as a full-time role. But during the whole period, I've been running incident skill sets of different ways with the SES as a volunteer. So really merging two great interests of emergency management into training. And then, of course, just doing more and more of that. So I was very privileged to start back in 94 as a visiting lecturer down at the Australian Emergency Management Institute at Mount Macedon, where I would fly to probably 20 to 30 times a year, as well as working. And that just gradually grew and grew. So very, very privileged to have had the sorts of experiences that I've had.
It's interesting because I also started off as a teacher and then found the love for the emergency services and emergency management and put the two together.
Yeah, as I said, I was a volunteer since I was 17 with the SES, and then did teaching, which are both, and if you think about it, teaching and the emergency management field are both about people. So I think that there's a common base to how you think about things across the two of those. And then very privileged to have been lucky to win a job as what was in those days called a District Emergency Management Officer for Central West New South Wales, a brand new Act of Parliament. And it was great because we were taken to the police college and shown the Act of Parliament. And they said, you've got 3 days to work out what it means, and then you're going to go out and make it happen. So this greenfields approach, which was always great to be part of something new. And it was actually the first of many times I've been lucky enough to be part of something new. That was a chance just to live the dream before going up to Sydney Water to run its emergency management program and its emergency management and counter-terrorism program, thanks to bin Laden. And then the Australian government organisational resilience program, which I worked with the Australian government to create back in the early 2000s after the World Trade Center attack. So, yeah, just time and time again, I've been lucky enough to be at the starting edge of new ideas and rapidly read to understand what I'm about to talk about. And so I think the challenge is when someone says there's something new needed is to be leading it, not to be at the back end of that new idea. And then we got onto the whole idea around neuroscience and the leadership. So I spent a lot of time, about 10 years ago, getting my head around that, which has been a great opportunity to spend the last decade or even more now, bridging the theory into practice. So really taking the theory of neuroscience and leadership and applying it to the emergency management sector. One of the problems with the sector, it's very insular. That's not good at learning from others. I think it's getting better at that, learning from other industry groups. And that's the challenge is lots of research goes outside the emergency management sector in terms of things like leadership, etc. How do we bring that in and make it work in our context? And I think there's often emergency management sector thinks it's very special and very different to the rest of the world. I'm not so sure about that. Lots of people go to work every day and face stresses and strains and have to make decisions rapidly, just like the emergency management sector. So how can we learn from that and bring it into our training is the challenge.
And a really good, ambitious thing to be trying to do. So 46 years as a trainer facilitator. Across that time, I'm sure you've got different courses and individuals that have stuck out in your mind. What's one of your favourite training memories, or what did you really enjoy thinking back about the different things that you have done?
Yeah, and I've been very privileged to have undertaken training in multiple countries. So I've been to Harvard University. They had a EM leadership program there, which I was privileged to be part of. I've studied at Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania and at the Charles Sturt University and at MIT in the US. So privileged to have learnt from many different people about their view sets about leadership in crisis and in terms of emergency management. But I really have to probably go back to my first 2 years in the SES. I was very privileged to be trained by a fellow by the name of Jack Thompson, who's a life member of the SES. Jack passed away some years back, but he really taught me all of my civil defence knowledge. And that's actually been sustained right through things I've thought about and done. And in a contemporary world where risk of war is rising, those core skill sets, those core ways of thinking about large disasters. We went through in Australia, unfortunately, a period of time where the jurisdictions, many of them, not all of them, moved away from thinking about large-scale disasters into an emergency management mindset, which is about things you can manage. And that was, I think, a bad outcome for the country. And we can now see people wanting to talk about catastrophic disasters like I was trained in 46 years ago, where you had volumes of problems that were large-scale. So I think that's definitely a thing which is returning to the industry, but it was there before. And what you often see is industries do this. They'll learn. They'll actually lose knowledge because you go into this sort of safe cycle. And there's certainly both the Australian government and the New Zealand government are doing a lot of work in that catastrophic disaster space. And that's not going to go away anytime soon.
So that's a memory of someone that trained you. Do you have a favourite memory of maybe some of the students that you've worked with over the years?
Yes. So obviously I've worked for some quite amazing students. It's great always working with students who actually know more than you. I learned so much from my students. And what is really amazing, I did a course recently in New Zealand, and it's a leadership development program. It's 6 weeks virtual, followed by a 1 week face-to-face program. And a gentleman at the very start of that, who was in his 70s, and he said to me at the start of the program, maybe I'm too old to learn much. And I said, never too old to learn anything. So what was really exciting was at the end of the face-to-face program, the students undertake a pile of work to look at assessment processes, etc. And one of the young people in his 20s who was on his table in the face-to-face wrote, I want to be like him. He's so keen to learn. He just soaks it up. And it was great to see someone who at the start of the program told me they're not sure they had anything to learn or would learn much. By the end of the program was inspiring the rest of their team they're working with to learn. So people like that are always great to be with. You learn so much from them about the learning mindset. And that's our challenge, is that in a world of rapid change, a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and then with the chaos that is going on, we really need to have all our leaders with a humility mindset in terms of recognize they don't know everything, and so rapidly wanting to learn, rapidly with an open mind, seeing what's happening, learning from others. The last thing we need in 2024 is a mindset of someone who thinks they know everything in a world that's changing fast, because that's just not possible. They're the dangerous leaders.
And it's great to hear that whatever happened on that program, it obviously, they really opened up their mindset from what they were engaging with, which leads me to my next question. When you put together programs like that, or when you put together all sorts of different training that I know you do, trainers often have their favorite go-to activity or a training approach that gets people involved and gets people active in the learning so that you end up with results like that. What's some of your favorite activities or approaches that you use?
So I'm a scenario addict. So I write hundreds of scenarios for use in training programs, everything from the normal things from floods, storms and bushfires, to earthquakes, to tsunamis, to measles outbreaks in scout camps, to cyber attack events, all sorts of things. But I always base them on true stories. And so I'm always looking for case studies, because people will often say to me, this can't happen. And I can go, here's the case study, this is where it happened. Oh. And so the challenge is, where do you find all those case studies? So I go to a lot of conferences, so I have to pick up stories there. But there's also things like the great resources from the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience, heaps of material there. And the Emergency Planning College in the UK, there's got dozens of free handbooks you can certainly download there. And there's free resources like the Canadian Journal that's of emergency management. People can get that for free as well. So I think the challenge is be reading widely to see what's really happening out there. And certainly AIDR has their major incidents report that comes out every year. It's about 4 years of those now. And there's a new product just out, a fellow from Queensland, and I haven't got it with me, is creating a lessons hub of all the different reports that come out of all these inquiries. So that's just coming out as we speak. Another resource. And I would urge people, if you're running training, you need to be reading lots of reports, lots of post-incident reviews, or lots of reports out of events, because they're a great resource to stimulate you to run realistic training. One of the challenges is, of course, training needs to be realistic. It needs to replicate what really happens in the world. So we often talk about, and I run planning subject for the uni. And one of the things we often call plans, so we call plans fantasy documents, because they're written by someone in a calm world with the power on and their cup of coffee, and they write a plan, because it doesn't actually relate to the real world when something happens where there's no power, the school's underwater, the kids can't go to school, your car's washed away. It's very different. So I think it's really important that people in the emergency management training space read widely of what really happens during incidents, during emergency events. So all those case studies you can find are really a great resource to make you knowledgeable and relevant to the people that you're actually training.
And so then how are you embedding that idea of using scenarios? How do you pull that in through the courses that you're running?
Yeah, a good example in New Zealand program we run, which is the leadership program for the New Zealand government. The 5-day residential program I talked about, which is the culmination of their 6 weeks of online study first. We do 5 exercises, 5 big discussion scenarios. They have little small ones as well, but 5 big ones, one every day, which allows them to apply the theory we've taught in the morning, or the people they've heard talk in the morning from their specialist knowledge. And we push them pretty hard. They've got time constraints. They've got difficult scenarios. We purposely pick scenarios that people don't know the answer to. And the answer is not necessarily easy if you did know the answer to it anyway. So scenarios that are outside the normal workspace. So they've got to actually stretch their thinking, building new ideas. They've got to actually work with others to solve that. So being a leadership program and a modern leadership program for the emergency management sector, it's about collaborative leadership. It's about knowledge sharing. It's about how do you solve unknown problems in a novel way. So they're really quite inspiring to watch the students go from the exercise 1 to 5, where they get harder and harder and time frames shorter and shorter, but they get better and better at pulling out key information, exchanging it, throwing around ideas, pulling solutions, all those sorts of things. So That's a challenge for the sector going forward in a world of uncertainty. The solutions from 2010 or 2011, they're not going to be relevant in 2023, 24 in a large way. The world's changing too much. That's a challenge for us. We need to have people evolving their ideas, not using static ideas.
I like that idea as well when you said there's a series of scenarios. So it's not just a one-off thing, but you're building it up. So you keep developing that skill set and that confidence, and everything gets a little bit more that hard fun level, just a little bit challenging each time as you go through the series. I really like that idea too.
We know that motivation and for people comes out of challenge. So you need to have challenge to have people step forward to actually progress. And in that case, we're also trying to build a tight bond between those people. And we know that people's bonds to others strengthen if they've gone through a difficult situation together, if they've had challenge together. So hence those exercises are part of building that bonding through. We both survived, or the groups survived through a really tough 3 hours, and has walked out with a success story in the end. But has had to work hard for that. And that's important too in terms of learning. The challenge is that easy learning doesn't, or easy context doesn't necessarily build good learning.
And I think as well, the idea of being discussion scenarios from a resourcing perspective, it requires time, it requires thought about getting that scenario together. But, that's something that I think would work virtually. It could work face-to-face. You don't need lots of hard copy resourcing and, equipment, but you just need the people with that time to think and talk and work through the problem. Yeah.
Then we get them a pile of tools to help them think. So one of the ones I introduced some years ago is a thing called ripple mapping, where you have it can be a wall or a chart, and you have in the middle what the problem is. So it might be an earthquake or a flood or a cyclone. And you start looking at all of the ripples of that. So what does that impact on? Well, people, communities, transport. Okay, so what? So what does that cause? So what? And you keep saying so what and so what. So it helps you think ideas through. It's to see forward. So you stop being reactive, start being proactive. It's a tool for doing that. And it's really tangible. As people write on a post-it note, they stick it on a wall, and you see these ripples start to grow. And then we will often ask the question, well, you've done the so what. So now the question is, so who? So who do you need to be partnering with in your network? Because the challenge is in a world of uncertainty. I know there's probably, we still teach command and control mindsets for simple problems, but they don't solve complex problems. And a complex problem, it's this network of interrelationships, networks of knowledge. And so ripple mapping is great for people who better go, wow, there's dozens of organizations here. Yeah. That doesn't fit into a command and a control chart. So then we would take those organizations off that ripple map and look at what is the actual network chart of how this all actually networks. And that's a great learning experience for the students, because they suddenly realize that, wow, these 120 organizations are very loosely networked, and some are strong network links, some are weak links and strong links. It breaks that the old 1970s command and control mindset.
And having seen you do ripple mapping a few courses ago now, it has been one that I have started picking up and using as well, just because for all those things you said, getting them to think through. And for me, I also found just getting people to think through their first obvious line of thinking, and to not stop at that first level, but that ripple mapping really pushes them to think about not just that immediate thought, but what else, and that bigger picture that you might give up if you just do a quick brainstorm, whatever else you miss out on, or that extra layers and wider thinking. So that's why I really like using it now too.
It's also really useful is when you've got your ripples built out, you can see where your actual transition from response to recovery comes, and you're good for that actual transition planning too. Another useful application of it.
So many ways to use ripple mapping. Everyone should try it. Okay, so let's think about when things don't go so well. What's your worst training or learning nightmare or fear when it comes to running programs?
I'll give you two there. First of all, I always worry about not having enough material. So I always have too much. But it's about sorting it into must know, must know, should know, could know. So working from that inner core out. And the second one is that the learner who has a closed mindset, the curse of the world, the person who thinks they know everything and has nothing else to learn, or doesn't want to contribute to others' learnings. So I would say to myself, if I was on a course for some reason and I knew most material, it's a great opportunity to be a coach and mentor to others. but you do meet the person occasionally who just is very confident that they know everything. They're the most dangerous people in the world, and no interest in helping others learn. Well, that's not the modern contemporary person we need in our sector or any other sector. They can be a challenge. Fortunately, we don't meet too many of those. Personally, I do try to engage them, but they are the rare ones. Most people you meet these days have open mindsets and rapid learning mindsets, which is good. Very much the skill sets for our contemporary world.
And you've mentioned some already, but what do you see as some of the roadblocks or the challenges for making sure we've got consistently great training in this public safety sector?
And it's probably an emerging challenge that maybe wasn't there some years ago. We want consistency of performance. So that comes from standardization of training and standardized SOPs. The challenge is when you've got novelty, that doesn't work. So you also need to teach creativity and innovation. So you've got a challenge and attention where you must do things this way. This team must be structured like this. But that's fine for routine problems. And now we've got a novel problem that we've not encountered before, where we don't have known solutions. We don't have SOPs that exist for those. So therefore, we need to now be creative. And if an organisation doesn't get the balance right, it kills that and can't activate that when it actually needs it. That's the challenge, providing those two types of training and how those two have to mesh. I think this is where industry does it much better. The industry, of course, has to be creative, has to be innovative to actually survive. So the challenge is, and that's what we're doing with the training in New Zealand, is building the creativity skill set to go on top of their operational processes. So New Zealand has the coordinated incident management system called SIMS, which is like Australian AIMS, but we're adding the leadership skill sets around creativity, innovation, collaborative mindsets, etc. So the challenge is you need both of those.
So big problem. Let's think local solutions. What do you think is one change that trainers and facilitators could be making in how they approach things and how they run their programs to maybe help address that type of challenge?
One of the things, and we've done this with some of the people that I've been working with, is they'll be training people as, say, an incident control level 2. And what I'll purposely do is use scenarios that are not their normal day-to-day scenario. So they've got to actually apply thinking process to using the standard model, if you like, or standard structures and thinking, but actually how do we innovate that? So now you've got a problem you've not seen before. You're meant to be this person who can lead at this level. Let's lead it in a context not seen before. And you can see them stand there and they go, "Oh, I don't do this one." And you go, "Well, you are today." And maybe 15, 20 minutes later, they're up and running because they just need time to break from the restrictive thinking that says, "I can't do this, I'm not trained because I only learned hazard X." And then they break that barrier with their team and go, "Yeah, we can do this. We do actually have other knowledge." And they bring the other knowledge they've got in, and all of a sudden, they're up and running. It's a constraint that's built into people's thinking, and we need to break that for a world that's got novelty and chaos aplenty.
And that's not a hard tweak for trainers to make either. I
Not
think
a hard tweak at all.
A very practical suggestion there.
And all of a sudden they do work out how to manage events they've never seen before and do it well by just bringing principles across, but being innovative at the same time.
Yeah, and that's got to be good for their wider confidence as well. Then moving forward, the next time they find something that isn't straight out of the box, they'll probably feel a bit more confident about just having a go and working through the same processes. And
because what we're seeing, and we're going to see more of this, is we're seeing people working across multiple hazards, whether it's the varroa mite responses, bushfires, floods, and other things, chicken disease outbreaks, and all stuff we've had over time. People from emergency services who might be trained in X suddenly find themselves working in a Y or a Z. There's going to be more of that. And what we're seeing too is a growing international operations. So more and more we're going to see people deploying across countries who have different cultures, different philosophies, different ways of thinking about what's important, and people need to adapt to those contexts. And so very rigid thinking is not going to be, even between Australia and New Zealand, we're very different. Very different thinking about communities, very different thinking about what's important. I think we can do more of that in that training phase.
And And that same thing with that open mindset, that growth mindset of I don't know everything about this community, this hazard, these people, but I can find out.
Yeah.
Now, you've already dropped a whole bunch of different resources that people should definitely have a look at from the AIDR and everything else. Any other resources that trainers should be taking a look at, and why?
Yeah, so I'm the president of the New South Wales division of the Australasian Institute of Emergency Services. We have a LinkedIn site, which is free. We post there every week probably a dozen resources from around the globe, but today we just posted a cyber incident response planning video and guidebook out of the US. So the resources there from all sorts of countries all get posted on there. So people can certainly join that LinkedIn site. There's no cost to do that, and they'll get access to all those things that we post there. So bits of news from all over the place, and it's really important too because you can see the trends and change of thinking that's occurring as well among when you start monitoring what's happening in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the US. You know, we are in an evolving sector where the community's expectations are evolving and changing. For example, we used to teach a lot about using the Defence Force in disasters. So if you look at Canada, Australia, across all the Western world, people are saying that has to stop. That has to be a lot less. So you pick up all those trends and you can adapt your training and your ideas to those trends that are changing.
And do you have a piece of advice? I mean, it's quite a small sector. Like if you look at the emergency management sector and then the people within that who are working as trainers and facilitators, it's not a huge group of people. Do you have any advice for the new facilitators and trainers who are coming in?
Yeah, I think the challenge is you end up working across multiple industry groups, multiple ways of thinking. The states and territories are all different. All do things differently, even though we might say we have national consistency through things like AIMS. When you get out there, it's actually not as consistent in terms of detail, although the high level probably is. So it's about realizing that your way you do it is not the only way. It might even be the best way. And when you start looking at ways done in New Zealand or Canada or New Zealand or Northern Territory or Queensland or South Australia, you start to pick up different ways of working through things. And it really is about being prepared to do a little bit of research and being open-minded to other ways and of thinking about the problem and other ways of actually doing things. And, first thing I would tell anyone who's going to try and learn anything about AIMS is go and read SIMS in New Zealand because their Coordinated Incident Management System Handbook, SIMS 4, which is on the web, it's free, has some good explanations that I think Australia could probably copy in our AIMS work too. So very much more community-centric handbook. So it's about reading different ways of thinking about and working through things. This is not just one way that matches every community and every situation.
And that is fantastic advice. Okay, final words. Anything else you want to share?
I think one last thing I'll share, Catherine, is to say that it's a great time to be working in the emergency management education sector. We're seeing lots of new people join the sector who need training, need education, need to be informed. So if I talk to my colleagues at universities, etc., the student surge is there, but it's badly needed. And there's lots to be learned, whether it be learning from the war in Ukraine, lots of learning starting to come out of there now, learning from disasters in other states and territories or overseas. What we really need are trainers in industry who are not locked in, who are researching, learning, expanding and growing themselves so they can grow and expand the students that they're actually meeting. And again, personally, I do go to lots of conferences and things and back over to the US and Canada in 2024, but you can learn just as much by attending free webinars. And I know on the Australasian Institute of Emergency Services LinkedIn site, we do post up webinars from all over the world. And again, most of those are free and you can learn so much about ideas and learnings just by attending webinars for half an hour. So it really need to be that active learner to be a good trainer.
Okay. Thank you so much, David, for sharing your time and experiences today. And most importantly, thank you for being such a passionate and dedicated leader and trainer in this space. You've seen so many things come and go and come back over the time, and being able to pick your brain and hear some of those insights is just really valuable. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in. If something has sparked your interest and you want to dive deeper, you can click on the show notes or access all of our contact details from our website, www.brioconsulting.com.au, or find us on our socials. And remember, it's not just about inspiring ideas, it's about making ideas happen. Take a minute to reflect, take something away from this episode to find out more about or to try yourself. And don't forget, we love to hear about aha moments and how you have taken action.